The first interface I ever bought was this little blue audio box USB. And it didn't sound amazing by any means, but I really just needed something to get a microphone into my computer. And before that, I was actually using a Digitech guitar pedal that had a USB output. So this was a decent upgrade. But again, it didn't sound the best. So I went ahead and moved to a Focusrite Scarlett 2i2. And I think everyone on earth has owned one of those at some point. I know you probably have. I know that I definitely have gotten a lot of use out of mine, but eventually I needed to move up to the big leagues. And I grabbed a Lynx Aurora. Actually, I got two of them and they were awesome, but to use them, you had to use a PCIe card in a desktop computer. So you'd have to open up your desktop, take these cards and physically slide them into a slot that's in the computer. At the time, this was the best way to transfer data really quickly, and it allowed you to have no latency. But as you can imagine, it was a huge pain in the butt, and it was pretty expensive. Now, as technology progresses, there's this little back and forth between the companies who make things like computers and memory cards, and the companies who are making the gear that we use. For example, my first camera shot video in 1080p, but sometimes I would shoot in 720p. But nowadays cameras shoot in 4K. So in the old days, I would bring a 32GB memory card and it would fill up over the course of a couple days. But now something like that wouldn't even get me a couple hours of footage, and all my memory cards are 128GB. It's kind of like how a PlayStation 1 memory card was literally one single megabyte, but now you buy an Xbox and it's got like a terabyte of storage. And laptops, interfaces, they're all kind of doing the same thing. So as audio has gotten more high fidelity and we've needed bigger hard drives and faster transfers, we have these USB-C interfaces and these Thunderbolt interfaces that perform really well. And one part of the equation for a lot of people has been upgrading to these universal audio interfaces. Now, if you don't know, these UA interfaces, they have something called UAD DSP. So DSP basically is extra processing that's built into the interface. So when you open a universal audio plugin on your session, it loads the plugin on your interface, and the interface actually processes the audio and sends it back into your computer. So it doesn't take up a lot of your processing power on your computer to use their plugins. Instead, the interface takes over. And what this has allowed people to do is use lots and lots of these universal audio plugins on their not so fast computers and not have to worry about things like crashes or having to freeze tracks all the time. And this is basically how I was working. So I would load up a bunch of UA plugins, a bunch of other plugins, and eventually when my computer started to slow down, I would freeze some tracks, I would commit up to a certain insert, and keep going from there. However, something happened recently where that has changed for me. So if you didn't see my gear I'm leaving in 2023 video, I very recently upgraded to a new MacBook. So my 2018 MacBook that I was using and freezing lots of tracks, well, now I'm using an M2 MacBook and it is so much faster and it is just performing so much better across the board. It is really smoking that 2018 MacBook. But that has led me to sort of an interesting problem, because in the same way that we kind of seesaw through like freezing tracks and committing tracks, then loading on more plugins and then freezing them again. Well, when I was doing that, I was freezing some of the UA plugins. I was committing up to a certain point on the UA plugins, which was taking a load off of my laptop, but also off of the interface. But now with this new computer, I haven't had to freeze a single track. And I recently was working on a project that had like 150 tracks of audio and software instruments, and my computer was handling it perfectly. But eventually I hit a wall on the UA side of things, which has never happened to me without already needing to freeze a bunch of tracks. So at a certain point in this session, I was not able to add any more universal audio plugins, but I was able to add as much of whatever else that I wanted. So after like track 100, I have no more UA plugins on this mix. So the Universal Audio LA2A that I normally use, well, I was using a different company's model. And at a certain point, I realized this has never happened to me. I've never run out of DSP or processing power on my UA interface without also having my computer just be crawling from all the other plugins that it's using. And that got me thinking about these Mac computers and these new chips and these interfaces, kind of the way you would think about like the PlayStation memory card. It feels like for a long time, everything was progressing kind of on level playing fields, just like one step up here, and then the computers grow to elevate to that same level. But now the computers have kind of leapfrogged forward in such a way that I feel like the hardware built into the interface almost isn't necessary. And I'm not the only person that has noticed this, because Universal Audio themselves, well, they are really starting to push for these native non-DSP versions of their plugins. They were giving one away for a long time for free to try to get people to move into using their UA plugins. And now I am getting absolutely bombarded by ads telling me from them, hey, you can run these plugins without your interface, and we're offering all these deals. So come start buying our plugins without the DSP needed. And that has me wondering, like, what is the future of UA interfaces? Are we gonna keep seeing them use this DSP, or will these new Mac chips kind of render that useless? Because in my opinion, yeah, it's awesome to like monitor through their plugins in console sometimes. I don't do it all the time, but at the end of the day, if my computer is not struggling to process all the audio and to use all these plugins, but my DSP is hitting a cap way sooner, then it makes me start to question if we even need DSP. And I honestly think once more and more producers and engineers have moved to these silicon MacBooks, we're going to start to see less and less emphasis on DSP and on these additional processing boosters and just letting the computer handle it all. Now, do I think Universal Audio as a company is going to be in trouble? No, I obviously don't. Like, they have a lot of products that people use. They still have some of the most popular interfaces, and their plugins are really good. But at the end of the day, one of the biggest selling points for their plugins is that you could run them on your interface and free up your computer. So obviously, if I don't need that anymore, then it takes away one of the biggest pluses from their plugins. So let me know what you think about this in the comments, because obviously there's a big shift going on here, and I think this could have some big implications for the future of UA and of their interfaces. So let me know if you're using their interface or if you've tried out these Silicon Macs yet, because I think they're awesome and they are a big jump forward. And if you like videos like this, go ahead and subscribe, because I post new audio videos every single week.